Thousands of miles from home, Grace Millane's Tinder date turned into a nightmare that would end her vibrant journey across the world. Join me as we unravel the heart-wrenching story of a young adventurer whose life was cruelly taken, sparking an outpouring of grief and solidarity across the globe. Welcome back to Chilling Fireside Stories. In today's documentary, we'll delve into the heart-wrenching case of Grace Millane, a young woman whose dreams in life were brutally cut short. Before we begin, I want to warn you that this video contains sensitive content that may not be suitable for all viewers. Please proceed with caution. Now settle in and let's begin. Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born in Essex, England in 1996. She was the youngest of 3 siblings, cherished by her parents David and Gillian, and adored by her older brothers Michael and Declan. Grace was known for her lively personality, strong family bonds, and love for all things creative and artistic. Grace pursued her education at the University of Lincoln, graduating with a degree in advertising and marketing. Eager for adventure before embarking on her career, she saved up for a year-long backpacking tour. Described as compassionate and caring, Grace even cut her long hair and donated it to the Little Princess Trust to be made into wigs for children with cancer before leaving for her trip. In October 2018, Grace set off from her family home to explore the world. She traveled to Peru, spending 6 weeks in South America. Along the way, she made friends with fellow travelers and eagerly shared her journey with her loved ones back home. On November 19th, Grace arrived in New Zealand alone, and 11 days later she reached Auckland. She checked into a hostel called Base Backpackers on Queen Street, sharing a room with other travelers. On the evening of December 1, 2018, Grace left the hostel, dressed in a knee-length black dress and white shoes, carrying a small handbag. She had plans to meet someone she had matched with on Tinder. Initially hesitant, Grace eventually agreed to meet for drinks after more conversation with her date. Grace met her date at Sky City, an entertainment complex with bars, restaurants, and a casino. Throughout the evening she sent messages to her friend Amina back home, expressing how well she was getting along with her date, who claimed to be an oil manager living in a hotel. The evening appeared to be going smoothly, and later they visited a place called the Bluestone Room. At one point, Grace got up from the table, but something odd happened, which was later revealed by the police when they reviewed the CCTV footage. When Grace left the table, for some reason her date picked up her handbag and started searching through it. Later they left the bar arm in arm and headed down the street. The next day, December 2nd, was Grace's 22nd birthday. Her family and friends back home were sending her messages and reaching out over social media. Uncharacteristically, Grace wasn't responding to anyone, and her 2 phones were going straight to voicemail. Grace's brother Declan mentioned that she had been enthusiastically sharing details and pictures of her trip with them. So when there was no response from her on her birthday, alarm bells rang. Grace, a home bird at heart, would never go silent like that. Her worried parents contacted the Auckland police on December 5th, reporting her missing. The police reached out to the hostel where Grace had been staying, and they confirmed she hadn't checked back in since December 1st. Initially there was no suspicion of foul play. Her belongings were mostly still at the hostel. The thought was maybe she had just stayed with new friends and forgotten to get in touch. However, the vast amounts of CCTV footage around the city helped detectives quickly trace Grace's movements on that fateful Saturday evening. The man she was spotted with was soon identified. The very night Grace was last seen, she had changed her Facebook profile picture, with a comment underneath saying, "Beautiful, very radiant." This comment was from her Tinder date, Jessie Kempson, who was residing at the City Life Hotel in Auckland. A previous post by Jessie caught the investigators' attention, where he expressed regret for his mistakes, arrogance, and selfishness. Jessie Kempson, 26, was born in Wellington. After his parents split, he was raised by his grandparents. Jessie was known as a habitual liar. He spun tales ranging from being the cousin of a famous All Blacks rugby player to claiming he was dying of cancer. He deceived employers, landlords, partners, family, and friends, which often led to evictions and job losses. A former landlord recalled Jesse claiming to be a professional softball player signed by New Zealand's national team, the Black Sox. After weeks of excuses, the landlord contacted the team's management, only to discover Jesse's lies. At the City Life Hotel, Jesse claimed to be a top manager for Woolworths, but in reality his rent was covered by state benefits. Recognizing Jesse as the last known person with Grace, the police knew he held crucial information. On December 5, the same day Grace was reported missing, Jesse was asked to come in for routine questioning. During Jesse's interview with the police, he recounted how he and Grace had matched on Tinder and decided to meet at Sky City. They then went to Andy's Burger Bar. Jesse mentioned that he initially didn't know if Grace was real, referring to the concept of catfishing, where someone uses another person's photos and pretends to be them. He felt safer meeting in a public place. He claimed that nothing unusual had happened that night. He said the date ended with a hug, a kiss on the cheek and plans to meet the next day, and that they parted ways on Victoria Street. He then mentioned that he tried to message Grace on Tinder the following day but noticed she had unmatched him, which abruptly ended their encounters. However, the police were very concerned for Grace's safety and suspected foul play. They asked Jesse for a voluntary DNA sample which he agreed to provide, insisting he hadn't done anything wrong. Despite his claims, the police continued their investigation, analyzing CCTV footage from the City Life Hotel. They began to piece together a more disturbing picture. Despite Jesse's claim that they parted ways on the street, the footage showed them arriving at the hotel arm in arm and exiting the lift together on Jesse's floor. Grace was never seen leaving the building. On the morning of Grace's birthday, cameras captured Jesse leaving the hotel. The police tracked his movements over the following hours. He went shopping for a suitcase, bought cleaning supplies and rented a red Toyota Corolla. Later he met another woman from Tinder, who reported feeling uneasy due to his disturbing conversations about burying bodies and his friends who were police officers. She declined his offer to get in his car and never spoke to him again. Jesse then hired a carpet cleaning machine, telling the staff he needed to clean red wine stains. That evening he loaded 2 suitcases onto a hotel trolley and placed them in the rented Toyota. The next day cameras captured him buying a shovel and later power washing the car. He then returned the car to the rental company, and it was subsequently rented out to someone else. Jesse was seen visiting various locations and disposing of items in bins. When the police arrived at the City Life Hotel to talk to him, Jesse happened to return. Upon seeing the police, he quickly turned around and tried to walk away, but the officers caught up with him and brought him in for questioning. Despite Jesse's denials, the police began a thorough search of his hotel room. On December 7, David, Grace's father, arrived in Auckland and made an emotional plea for help. The investigation was moving quickly, and although the police didn't name him, they revealed they had spoken to Jesse and that he was a person of interest. As time passed, the fear for Grace's safety grew, and the police stated they had grave concerns for her. On December 8, as more evidence came to light, Jesse was taken into custody and interviewed again. This time his story had drastically changed. He claimed that during their date, Grace had talked about 50 Shades of Grey and asked for more daring activities. He said when they went back to hotel together they ended up on the floor and she asked him to hold her throat. Jesse claimed he then took a shower and fell asleep, only to wake up and find Grace dead. He panicked, put her body in a suitcase and drove out to bury her, still denying any guilt. Jesse's account was filled with inconsistencies. He said he thought Grace had left when he exited the shower, but the police were not convinced. They pressed him to take them to where he had buried her. Jesse was eventually arrested for the murder of Grace Millane. The forensic search of Jesse's room revealed more disturbing details. Despite his attempts to clean up, Grace's blood was found covering the floor of the hotel room. Given what Jesse had told them, it didn't take long for the police to start searching an area on Scenic Drive near the Waitakere Reservoir. Shortly after 4 p.m. that day, officers found a body around 10 yards from the road. Detective Inspector Scott Beard led the investigation and provided an official announcement. The grief was shared throughout the nation, with thousands of people paying tribute to Grace and holding vigils. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made a heartfelt speech.
Firstly, I cannot imagine the grief of her family and what they will be experiencing and feeling right now. And my thoughts and prayers are with her father, David, who is in the country, her mother, Gillian, who cannot be here, and her wider family, friends, and loved ones. From the Kiwis I have spoken to, there is this overwhelming sense of hurt and shame that this has happened in our country, a place that prides itself on our hospitality, on our manaakitanga, especially to those who are visiting our shores. And so, on behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
Following this, Jesse Kempson was formally charged with the murder of Grace Millane on December 10th, just 5 days after she was reported missing. He appeared in court in Auckland and was granted interim name suppression to ensure a fair trial, which is why much of his interview footage was blurred out for a long time. An autopsy confirmed that Grace had been strangled and had bruises on her arms and chest, consistent with being pinned down. Considerable force would have been required, and the pressure on her neck must have lasted several minutes to be fatal. At around 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, as Grace lay deceased in his room, Jesse conducted several internet searches using his phone. He looked up various topics, including the location where he lay. Just over a month after Grace was found, hundreds of people attended her funeral at Brentwood Cathedral in Essex. Detective Inspector Scott Beard, who had been overseeing the case, flew to England to pay his respects and support the Millane family. 6 days after Grace was laid to rest, Jesse appeared in the High Court and pled not guilty. His trial began in November later that year and lasted 3 weeks. Throughout the trial, Jesse remained emotionless, occasionally glancing down at court papers or holding his head in his hands. Jesse's defense team argued that Grace's death was a tragic accident during consensual adventurous activities that had gone horribly wrong. They claimed that Grace had engaged in similar encounters before meeting Jesse and that this time it had been a tragic case of misadventure. They said Jesse had panicked and attempted to hide Grace's body after realizing the encounter had accidentally taken her life. However, the prosecution presented a mountain of strong evidence and witnesses. They argued that Jesse did not panic and that his actions were deliberate and intentional. They said he had calmly and callously set about covering his tracks, creating a labyrinth of storytelling and lies as he went. Despite his protests of innocence, on December 22, 2019, after just 5 hours of deliberation, Jesse Kempson was found guilty of the murder of Grace Millane. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years.
This is the end of a long and difficult period of time for the Millane family. The impact of losing their daughter on her birthday in a foreign country has been devastating, and no matter what this outcome today, they will forever have the life sentence.
The verdict of murder today will be welcomed by every member of the Millane family and friends of Grace. It will not reduce the pain, the suffering that we've had to endure for over the past year. I can't see it. Grace was taken away from us in the most brutal fashion a year ago, and our lives and family have been ripped apart. This will be with us for the rest of our lives.
Many people expressed their anger at how Grace's life had been presented during the trial and how her death had been explained away by her killer. They felt it was shameful and grotesque victim blaming, rather than placing the blame on the murderer himself. Jesse's family branded him a pathetic fantasist. His stepbrother mentioned that Jesse lied about pointless things all the time and continued to lie until he had no way out, at which point he would break down, cry, and run away. After being found guilty of murdering Grace in the highly publicized trial, Jesse faced 2 further trials the following year. These were judge-alone trials with no jury present. 2 women had come forward after seeing the blurred images of Jesse following his arrest for Grace's murder, recognizing him instantly. Both had horrific stories to share with the officers about Jessie. In the first of these two trials in October 2020, an ex-partner recounted the physical, emotional, and financial abuse she endured while with him. Jessie would threaten her, physically harm her, and drained her account of $10,000. He was found guilty of 8 charges and sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. In November 2020, Jessie faced another trial, this time for assaulting a young British tourist he had met on Tinder 8 months before he murdered Grace Millane. He had threatened her, saying, "If you don't do this, I will harm you and your family, and you know I will." Jessie was found guilty and received an additional 3.5 years in prison for this crime. This brought his total additional sentence to 11 years, which would run concurrently with the sentence for Grace's murder. When Justice Jeffrey Venning found him guilty, Jessie reacted with an aggressive outburst claiming, "You have no reason to convict me." Tragically, in November 2020, David Millane, Grace's father, passed away after a battle with cancer. After Grace Millane's tragic death, her mother, Gillian Millane, and her cousin, Hannah O'Callaghan, founded the Love Grace charity in 2019. Inspired by Grace's love for handbags, the charity collects donated handbags and fills them with essential toiletries for domestic abuse victims. Their initial goal was to create 50 bags, but the overwhelming response allowed them to surpass this target, and they have since distributed over 15,600 bags to women in need across the UK and worldwide. Please consider donating to the Love Grace charity. I will leave the link to the Love Grace website in the description. The charity has also raised funds for White Ribbon Charities, which educate men and boys on attitudes contributing to violence against women and girls. Gillian's efforts extended to climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, raising over £30,000 for the cause. Their dedication and hard work have made a significant impact, helping countless individuals and raising awareness about domestic abuse. Grace's mother, Gillian Millane, and her cousin, Hannah O'Callaghan, were honored with OBEs, Officers of the Order of the British Empire, for their exceptional contributions to charitable fundraising and their efforts in combating violence against women. To honor Grace's memory and help others stay safe, here are some key safety tips for traveling and using dating apps. Always inform someone of your plans and who you're meeting, especially when going out alone. Choose public places for initial meetings and trust your instincts. If something feels off, leave immediately. Use location-sharing apps to keep loved ones informed and consider carrying a personal safety device for added protection. Be mindful of your alcohol consumption to avoid vulnerability. Verify the identity of dating app matches through video calls and social media. Always have an exit plan to ensure you can leave any uncomfortable situation. By following these precautions, we can help ensure a safer environment and carry forward Grace's caring spirit. Thank you for watching today's episode of Chilling Fireside Stories. If Grace's story touched you, please share your thoughts in the comment and let's keep her memory alive. Until my next video, stay informed, stay safe, and look after yourselves and your loved ones.